So we are going to be in Deuteronomy today, and we'll be in Deuteronomy chapter 5. And as we are kind of making this big picture walk, right? We started in Genesis, so the basic creation, how God created us in His image, created us to be in a relationship with Him in a perfect setting, where really there was only one thing, because we were in a relationship with Him that was not broken. And so the only thing we had to do is choose to stay in that relationship. That's really what it came down to. That was the only rule, if you will, right? Is choose to stay in a relationship with the one who created you. But He did create us with the ability to choose not to. And in essence, that is exactly what happened with Adam and Eve, and that's what happens with all of us. And then that choosing to be our own God, right, and kind of reverse the order, that leads then to all kinds of behaviors that are ungodly, right? But it starts with that. And so even the littlest sin is actually a result of us getting the order improper. And so now, rather than God being God, we step up and try to take that role, and things don't go well. Right? And so we saw Adam and Eve leave the garden, and things get progressively worse very quickly, right? To the point that we have Noah, and that humanity has gone so far away that there was no one righteous except Noah, right? And it talks about the violence, and that God's creation, whom He loves, us, we're violently destroying ourselves. And so, sometimes we look and say, wow, that's pretty rough, sending a flood to destroy. Well, we were destroying ourselves anyway, right? So there's an act of mercy there that God's like, no, I cannot handle, I'm not going to allow this sinfulness to go on. There's going to be cost. And we see that throughout Scripture, that there has to be a cost and a payment for our sin. And so we have that, and then we have God promising Noah and saying, and giving a few more commands. Say, maybe I didn't make it explicit, but you shouldn't kill each other, right? So it's kind of, here's a little more guidance. I thought you were a little smarter than that, but the IQ, it just keeps going down. Which, by the way, did you see that the IQ in America for the first time in a long time actually went down? Yeah, not too surprising. Makes a lot more sense out of some things. But we humans just continue again to choose to be God themselves, and it just messes up. And the further you go, the worse the behaviors get. Right? It kind of starts off. It may start off kind of small, but the further and further you get, eventually, the more that you see yourself as God, and we usually don't do this consciously, right? We don't think of ourselves that way. But the more and more you take it into your own hands, you can start to justify anything. And if I am God, then any of my actions I can justify because it benefits me, right? To the point of murder. I mean, that's where that flows from. And so we see that after Noah, things continue on. You have the Tower of Babel, where God causes confusion, because again, what are the people trying to do? Trying to become God themselves. And then they get separated out. And then God works through a guy named Abraham, and He's going to work through a people group. And He does, but that group ends up in Egypt and then becomes enslaved in Egypt. And so we have that very important Passover moment that is very symbolic of what God is doing, how He is bringing His people out of slavery, but that came at a very high cost, right? A sacrifice had to be made. But He brings that group of people out, and then they go off into the desert and start wandering. And then they end up at Mount Sinai, and they're seeing, remember, they are seeing amazing miracles happen. God is without any doubt he is revealing himself to them. And even then, they struggle, right? They show that sinfulness, right? It's uncomfortable out in the desert. And so many times they say, it would be better if we were just back in slavery in Egypt. It isn't, if you've ever struggled, when you've struggled with sin that has consumed your life, that you've kind of given into and kind of lived that lifestyle, whatever it may be, and that can be all kinds of different things, right? But you knew that you were allowing a sinfulness you were giving into it all the time. Whenever you try to break that, it's really hard. And many times you're going to have that thought, you know what? It was just a lot easier whenever I was just giving into the sin. Maybe I should go back to that. That is what the people of the Hebrew people would do. It's like, maybe we had it better back in Egypt. No, you were enslaved, right? God is providing something new. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's something new. It's something that he desires for you. And so God then reveals to the people the law. And you see that quoted. Jesus quotes it, the law and of the scriptures. And basically he's referring back to what God revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai through the Ten Commandments, and that he gave the people. And this is a new element to God's relationship with humanity, right? It's very specific. He's like, okay, y'all haven't got it before. Y'all have really struggled with this. So now I'm going to lay it out for you. Here are the basic guidelines, right, that should flow naturally if you are in a relationship with me, right? If you're in a relationship with me, all of these other things come natural. But because you're constantly trying to kind of maneuver and take God and become God in your own life, that leads to all kinds of behaviors. So you know what? I'm just going to write them down. And if you follow these, it will be much better for you as an individual. But guess what? I'm throwing in an added bonus. It will be much better for you as a society, as a group of people. It would be so much better if you would just follow these things. And then within that, and we're not going to read all of these, but within that, God knows that people are still not going to live up to those commands. And so he goes into depth on, here's how you offer sacrifices to atone for your sinfulness, right? Because I want you to stay in a relationship with me. But I can't have that whenever sin is still separating us. So you have to atone for that sin. So you have to follow the law, and then whenever you don't, you have to go through steps to atone for that sin, right? So he's laying out a new system, if you will, to relate to the people, all again with the purpose that that group of people will become so successful and different that the rest of the world will see them and say, wait, why are they different? And they say, well, because we worship the one true God. That's why, right? And so that God is able to reach out to everyone else. So that gets us to, we're going to read from Deuteronomy. We are going to read the Ten Commandments and the Shema, which the Shema is kind of the cornerstone foundation of the Jewish faith. But this is actually Moses. They're about to go into the promised land, right, and take the promised land. And Moses is kind of recapping, hey, here's what we've done. Of course, then they also backtrack and they don't go into the promised land. All of these things happen. But this is Moses reminding them of what God gave. And the Ten Commandments, they literally changed the world. They changed societies. Our society would not be here as it's constituted now without the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments led to unbelievable freedom and success of nations that had never been seen before. And if people groups would follow the 10 Commandments, it would go well for them and for society around them. But of course, that's, come on, 10 whole rules? Give me a break. That's ridiculous. All right, so Deuteronomy chapter 5, starting in verse 6. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third, fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor male or female servant, nor your ox or donkey or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your town, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Honor your father and your mother, as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live long and that it may go well with you in the land of the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not set your desire on your neighbor's house or land, his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. And then the end of that chapter, verse 32. So be careful to do what the Lord your God has commanded you. Do not turn aside to the right or to the left. Walk in obedience to all that the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live and prosper and prolong your days in the land that you will possess. All right. So this is the foundation, the cornerstone of the relationship that God is creating with this group of people. And it's a promise that if you follow these things, that it will go well for you, right? That it will go well in the land, that society will be blessed if you follow these commands, right? And these commands, sometimes we look at them and we think, oh, well, yeah, that anyone would come up with most of those. Well, not really, right? They may come up with it for themselves, but not apply it to other people, right? Because if we are putting ourselves as God, we start making the rules to benefit only ourselves. And we start to manipulate, to rationalize. So the very first commandment, God reminds them, he says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. So what is he doing there? He's saying, remember where you were? Remember you were in slavery? You had no hope of release. It was only going to be getting worse for you. There was never going to be freedom. But remember, I came to you when you were enslaved. I came to you then, not because you deserved it, but because I am a God who made a promise, and I am going to free you. I'm going to restore you and restore the relationship I have with you. And so the very first one, you shall have no other gods before me. Very simple. You just don't do it. And what's the biggest God that we seek after? It's ourselves. You have no other God before me, right? And recognizing that there is only one God. There is only one creator of heaven and earth. That is vital to understand. He is establishing the original created order of things that God created, and then we are under that. So if we break that first commandment, what we're doing is we are just getting rid of the original created order of things because we think we can do it better. Right? So God says, have no other gods before me. And then the second one basically is just like a continuation. Right? It says, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth below, waters, right? Think about what the situation was for those people. They had been in Egypt. There were numerous gods. And all of them, how were they represented? By things that humans created. Right? Humans created images to represent all of these different gods. So if as a human you create a god, have you not elevated yourself above the one true God? Yes, you have. Even if you say, well, no, I'm worshiping this God over here. No, but you created it. It's not real. That God doesn't exist. You may say that you submit to it. That's wonderful, but you've created what you submit to. Therefore, you are greater than that which you created. God is creator. We submit to him. The order is vital. And the Ten Commandments, that's what they start out, right? That there's only one God, it's me. Don't create something to replace me. Now, that would have been very simple for the people back then because it was normal for societies to have multiple gods and idols, right? That's how you worshiped the gods, right? So it would have been very easy, and this would have been an extreme statement back then. In fact, this is why Rome really would get frustrated with the Jews and then eventually Christians. It wasn't because they had a different religion. Rome could care less about that. They let people worship whatever they wanted. But the fact that they had the audacity to say, no, there's only one God. And guess what? All those gods that y'all are worshiping, yeah, they're fake. That's what Rome didn't like. And then whenever Caesar started to claim that they were God, that became a problem as well. Right? But this was completely new, something that was society changing, right? And it took a while, but over time, as Christianity then eventually expands, all of a sudden you start seeing people kind of agree with that. Right? Yeah, there is one God. Our country was founded on that basic premise, right? But I would say that today we are actually closer to the situation that the ancient Hebrews were in whenever they received this. We live in a society where saying there is only one true God, that most people disagree with that, right? So whenever I say the religion of Islam is following a false God, are there connections? Yeah, there's connections. But whenever I say that is a idol created by man, most people aren't going to agree with that. Whenever I say following Hinduism, Buddhism, there can be good things within them, but they are not following the one true God. Right? I am now in the minority. And in fact, that's a very offensive thing to say, even though I'm not trying to be offensive to people who follow those religions. Right? God doesn't want us to be offensive to them, but he also doesn't want us to lie and say, yeah, worshiping a cow in India is the same as worshiping the one true God who created the universe. No, it's not. It's not. Right? There is only one God, and you shall make no images or idols, because when you make images or idols, it is just the physical manifestation of you saying, nope, I'm really God. That's what it is. Right? And when you start off and you're following this in your own life, it makes it good for you, because at least you are now acknowledging the right order of things. As a society, if we at least embraced this, it goes better for society as a whole. And you can look throughout history on countries, and of course Israel and the United States are two examples, but many European countries as well. When they truly were trying to follow this, there was more prosperity. When they were not, they started experiencing major problems. So then you go to the third: you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. For the Lord will not hold anyone who guiltless who misuses his name. We've also, of course, do not take the Lord your God's name in vain. And many times we limit that to just, you don't say God, you don't say Jesus in a, kind of slang use, in a cursing way. Well, yes, that's part of it. But this is much bigger than that. It is using the name of God to your own benefit, taking advantage of the name of God. And we've seen that especially as Christianity grew. The best examples are within what we would now call the Catholic Church, but how that could be wielded as power in order to expand territory, expand kingdoms. That was misusing the name of God, right? Using that as justification to conquer, justification to go and to destroy another nation, right? Misusing the name of God, using God's name to benefit you. Right? Then you keep going. It says, observe the Sabbath. Now, why is this one important? Because God knows that it's easy for us to take things for granted. Right? It's easy for us just to start going through life and just trying to make it one day after another. So he said, no, you need to take time to remember all of this that's happening. You need to take time to remember how I brought you out of slavery. Take time to remember how I parted the Red Sea. Take time to remember what I have called you to do. To remember that I am still the only one true God, that you shall have no other gods before me. Right? That's the essence of what the Sabbath is about. There are some other benefits to it, but on its face, that is what it's doing, because he knows the human heart, unfortunately, we desire to move away from God rather than to move to him because of the sinfulness that is all around us. And so if we don't take time intentionally to remember who he is, what he has done, we will easily start walking away. Then it starts to shift a little bit to how we interact with each other. Honor your father and your mother. This is a very interesting one. It actually has a promise that it'll go well with you. This is a societal thing. Also, how best do we navigate this world? Well, we know that God is God first, and then God has blessed us with the family. That family is there to be a source of strength, to be an encouragement, to help hold us together. And so the idea of honoring your father and mother is honoring the family. Now, we immediately say there are some parents who are not worthy of honor. God is not saying that they are worthy of honor, but he is saying you recognize the importance of the family and your role and your place and the importance of that. Right? And at the very least, you can honor your mother or father, no matter how bad they were, in the fact that they gave you life. And that may be all that you can do. Right? This isn't justifying horrible parents. That's not what this is. But it is recognizing how important that family role is. And if you notice, this is under direct attack in our society today, to weaken the family, to divide the family through different ideologies that come straight from hell, are being used to destroy and tear apart our families. I mean, we have school systems who have it in policy that they will not tell mom and dad, that mom and dad don't have a right to know what their children are being taught. That is flying in the face of the Ten Commandments, right? And we know nothing's perfect because we live in a sin-filled world. So there are some parents that are bad parents, but we have to value the family. It is vital. It is the best way to succeed, to move forward. Then you continue to go on. It says, you shall not murder. You would think that would be an obvious one. Right? It's interesting. You can listen to lots of debates, and there are many atheists who believe that, because to me, a valid question is, without God, without a creator who has told us that this is wrong, why is murder wrong? Right? You have to take all the emotion and all that stuff out. But if there's not a God, and we're just all random here, and you're just in it for yourself, why is murder wrong? There's really no justification. You can try to create reasons, but listen, we walk on the line of devaluing life anyway. Right? I mean, you look at Canada, what's going on with some of the assisted suicide. You can be mentally ill by your own standards and enter into a program where your life can be taken. Right? And they're even extending that to younger people. Right? Whatever you think about abortion and things like that, that is not valuing life at a certain stage, at the very least. So it's not too far of a leap to then say, well, why is it wrong just to get rid of that person that's really bothers me, stresses me out, right? They're just constantly, causing problems for me. Why not? It's all about you. If you're God and not God, why not? Because God said, do not murder, because everyone is created in the image of God, no matter how bad they may be. They are created in the image of God, and you value life because God is the creator of life, and he gave us life. And so therefore you value it above all else, and you do not murder. And then he goes, you do not commit adultery. Why? Because that destroys the family. You don't do that because that's just following your own desires. I'm just doing this because I want to feel good. No, the consequences of that kill society, destroy families. He's saying, do not break what I have brought together. He continues, you shall not steal. Right? That there is something about recognizing people as individuals, which again, this is very different. I don't want to get into a socialism, communism, all that kind of stuff, but this flies in the face because it recognizes people as individuals, and the things that they belong to them are part of them. And you are violating that if you just take what you want. If you're just taking what you want, what are you doing? You're saying, you know what? I'm God. I can determine who needs what. You know what? That person doesn't need a second nice car. I'll just take it. Why not? That's equitable, right? We need to make it where everyone has the same. So I'm God. I'll just say, I'll take from this and give to this guy over here. This guy look at how much money they make. We'll give it to this person over here who doesn't have as much. Guess what? That is a never-ending cycle that just ends up destroying society. So you value. Now, God also comes back with that, and he calls us to be good stewards, and he calls us to help, and he calls us to give. But God knew, and he knows that we have to view the whole person and value the whole person, and that includes their belongings. So it says, do not steal. You shall not give false witness. Again, lying, trying to manipulate your neighbor. And then the last one, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not desire your neighbor's house or land. Again, that is at the root of all the other stuff, right? So again, recognizing who God is, recognizing people as individuals created by him is so important. And then he promises that those who do this, that they will be prospered. So then Moses goes right in to chapter 6, and I want to close with a couple of passages here. Chapter 6, verse 4. This is the Shema. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord with all your heart, all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit down at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your house and on your gates." Right? That these commands become part of who you are, that you are walking in this relationship with God, that is what you think about, that now it becomes natural to live these out. You don't have to have an index card, and before you make a decision, wait, was murder on there? Yes, it was. No, it just becomes natural to who you are because of the relationship that you are in. And then the very end, I want to close with this passage, starting in verse 20. It says, "In the future, when your son asks you, what is the meaning of these stipulations, decrees, and laws the Lord our God has commanded you?" So whenever we're wondering, what's the point of those 10 dusty things written on a stone tablet? Right? Why are those things important? That's been like 5,000 years ago. What do they matter today? It says, "Tell him, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Before our eyes, the Lord sent signs and wonders, great and terrible, on Egypt and Pharaoh and his whole household. But he brought us out from there to bring us in and give us the land he promised on oath to our ancestors. The Lord commanded us to obey these decrees and to fear the Lord our God, so that we might always prosper and be kept alive, as is the case today. And if we are careful to obey all the law before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us, that will be our righteousness." What did God want from the beginning? He wanted goodness and righteousness. That is what he wanted for the world. That's what he wants for you and for everyone. And by following these commands, that is our righteousness. Now, what we'll see is that people kept not following the commands and therefore could not be righteous on their own. And so God made a way for different atoning sacrifices and things like that, but people continue to struggle, and that's going to lead to God doing something radical. That he's going to come and he's going to pay for that sinfulness. He's going to offer himself as a sacrifice so that we can find righteousness in him, because we're going to fall short. But he loves us so much that he will do anything to offer us the opportunity to be righteous, the opportunity to be in a forever relationship with Him. And the reflection of that is that we obey and that we follow His commands, that we choose to be instruments of righteousness in the world around us. It's a powerful, powerful message. It's a powerful thing that God has done for us. And He desires for the world to be transformed by it, which is why it's so devastating whenever I see societies move away from these foundational principles. And it breaks God's heart because He desires for there to be goodness and righteousness, not evil and destruction and death, but the result of going our own way, the result of us choosing to be God, leads to separation. It leads to destruction. It ultimately leads to death. But thankfully, we have a God who brings us back into a relationship with Him. Let's go to Him in prayer.